Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Today again we're continuing our reading and discussions on Lord Rishabhdev. Today's text is text 31. It's quite long prose, so what I will do is I will read the words and then we'll go through the translation. Okay. Ati, you can repeat after that. Ati Sukumara Kara Karanaro Shtihala Vipula Bhava Amsa Gala Vadanade Avyavaya Vinyasa Prakriti Sundara Subhabhava Hasa Sumukhu Nava Nalina Dalayamana Sisriya Tararanunatya Nanyana Ruchira Sadurasa Subhaga Kapola Karna Kanta Naso Vigrudha Simita Vadanan Mahotsavavena Pura Vanitanam Manasi Kusuma Sarasanam Upadhadhana Parag Avalambhamana Kutila Jatila Kaspisa Kesa Bhuri Bharo Vadhuta Malina Nija Sarirena Graha Grahita Ivadrisyata. Okay, so it's again it was very long, but we'll read the words again and then the English translation. Atisu Kurmar, very delicate. Kara, hands. Karana, feet. Urashtihala, chest. Vipula, long. Bahu, arms. Amsa, shoulders, gala, neck, vadhanan, face, adi, and so on. Avaya, limbs, vinyasa, properly situated. Prakriti, by nature. Sundara, lovely. Swabhava, natural. Hasa, with smiling. Sumukha, his beautiful mouth. Nava, Nalina, Dalai Yamanan, appearing like the petals of a new lotus flower. Sisra, taking away all miseries. Tara, the. Irisi, Aruna, reddish. Ayata, spread wide. Nayana, with eyes. Ruchira, lovely. Sadrasa, sech. Subhagha, beauty. Kapola, forehead. Karna, ears. Kanta, neck. Nasha, his nose. Vigudha smita, by deep smiling. Vadhana, by his face. Mahautsavena, appearing like a festival. Puravanitanam, of women with household life. Manasi, in the heart. Kusuma, Sarasanam, Cupid. Upadadhanan, awakening. Parak, all around. Avlambhanam, spread. Kutila, curly. Jatila, matted. Kapasisa, brown. Kesa, of hair. Buri bhara, possessing a great abundance. Avadhuta, neglected. Malina, dirty. Nija, sarirena, by his body. Graha, grihita, haunted by a ghost. Eva, as if. Adrisyata, he appeared. So that's quite a lot to remember, but I'll read the translation now by His Divine Grace. Lord Rishabh's hands, feet, and chest were very long. His shoulders, face, and limbs were all very delicate and symmetrically proportioned. His mouth was beautifully decorated with his natural smile, and he appeared all the more lovely with his reddish eyes spread wide like the petals of a newly grown lotus flower, covered with dew in the early morning. The irises of his eyes were so pleasing that they removed the troubles of everyone who saw him. His forehead, ears, neck, nose, and all other features were very beautiful. His gentle smile always made his face beautiful, so much so that even attracted the hearts of married women. It was as though he had been pierced by the arrows of Cupid. About his head it was abundant of curly, matted brown hair. His hair was disheveled because his body was dirty and not taken care of. He appeared as if he were haunted by a ghost. Purport. Although Lord Rishabhdev's body was very much neglected, his transcendental features were so attractive that even married women were attracted to him. His beauty and dirtiness combined to make his beautiful body appear as though it were haunted by a ghost. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharani Nirvasesha Sunyavadi Paskachi Disatarani Namo Mahabharanaya Krishna Premapadaya Te Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Gauratishe Namo Namaha Namo Brahmanaya Devaya Go Brahmanaya Jagaditaya Krishnaya Govanaya Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrindavan Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So before I begin to speak, I would like to ask one question. One of you young men sitting in the front seem to be educated. Did you go to college? Yes? So, can you read this word? Philosophy, yes. And again, what is this word saying? It's the same word, philosophy. So, most processes of self-realization, most religions, anything that has to do with God will have their own individual philosophies. Most religions have simply one book on the philosophy of God or on the processes of self-realization. But here in our society, we have volumes and volumes and volumes of book. So therefore, I have written philosophy twice, and for safekeeping, I want to put them in this small container here. Philosophy should be protected and kept safe. So we have already read many things about the characteristics of Lord Rishabhdev, how he ruled his kingdom, and during this period of time he begot 100 sons. So one may think that to beget children, it is simply a process of seminal injection into the womb of a woman. But the actual form and the characteristics of the child that is to be begotten begin in the heart of that person who is going to engage in sexual intercourses. So therefore, in order to beget good children with qualities which will help them advance in spiritual life, there are rules and regulations which are described in the Vedas on how to proceed. Garbhadan Samskara, for example, is one. Prabhupada gave instructions to grihastras wanting to have children before sexual contact, sit down together and chant 64 rounds. So even today most devotees never chant 64 rounds. But if one would do this, chanting 64 rounds, then when seminal injection takes place, already the heart has become pure, and the spirit soul that will be entering into the womb of the woman will be more or less an elevated soul. However, today in this society everyone is living and producing nothing but unwanted progeny. And what is unwanted progeny called? Varna Sankara. So we are all more or less this type of products. At least I can speak for myself. I am this type of product. Perhaps your parents were more pious and performed the proper samskaras. But King Bharat, King Vrishabhdev, he knew very well what was required of him, and he begot 100 sons. Now 100 sons seems quite impossible, but of course the life expectancy was much longer in this period of time. And he kept himself, he kept his sons, everyone in his family fixed on the path of self-realization. And as his family was growing, he observed that one of his sons, Bharat, stood out amongst all of the other sons, and when it was time for him to leave his family life, renounce his wealth, renounce his kingdom, he appointed Bharat to replace him. And he advised all of his other sons, Shri Shri Gaurnitai, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram, Shri Shri Radha Shyamasundar Shakadev Jai. He advised all of his other sons and family members to follow the new king Bharat. But Bharat, as being a king in the body of the Varna, he is the arms, which means that he is to give protection to the populace, to the peoples of the kingdom. So therefore, arms alone cannot function properly. And he knew that according to the Vaishnava customs and traditions, he must take instructions from the qualified Brahmins. And therefore, he did this process. In Kali Yuga, this does not take place. We have no head, and even our arms of society are unqualified Sudras. So basically, everything within Kali Yuga, with a very small exception, is based on Sudra mentality. I'd like to tell some personal experiences with myself. When I was a very young boy, I became very curious, and I had questions that needed to be answered. And of course, who does one turn to as a child when they're in need of answers, help? They turn to friends, or they turn to their parents. And I asked my father, I believe I was six years old at that time. I asked him, what is the most important thing in life? And he looked at me, he said that the most important thing in life is to work very hard, make a lot of money, after work go out and get drunk, and then try to get laid, and if you cannot get laid, get into a fight. So these were words of wisdom that I received from my father. And from that very moment, I knew that I had a fool as a father. But for him, this was his way of life. He lived, one night he came home with a small matchbox about this size. He asked me to open it, and inside this matchbox there was a finger. And evidently he had been drinking, got in a fight, and bit his opponent's finger off and kept it as a souvenir. And he told me, words of wisdom are that if your opponent is bigger than you, the first thing you do is you jump up and you grab hold of his ear and you rip his ear off his head and shove it in his mouth. And then your adversary will be defeated and you can do whatever you want. So, of course, even at that young age, I had the intelligence to see that there was no hope for my father. So, at 7 years old, I was lying in bed and I was thinking to myself, who are these people that are down the hall? You know, in my home. Down the hall means in the bedroom of my mother and father. Who are they? What does it mean, mother? What does it mean, father? To me, these are just words. There was no communication, there was no reciprocation. It was like a vacuum. And then thinking that in every house in our neighborhoods, there was a mother and a father and 2 children, maybe a dog. Most people had swimming pools, and they would eat food, they would go to school, they would come home from work, they would plan their summer vacations, they would do things. And this was a routine that the entire society was going through. And I knew that there was something more than this. Life was more than simply these very mundane activities. So from the age of 7 years old, I began running away from home. At least once a month, I would run away. I would stay somewhere, sometimes sleeping under a tree, sometimes sleeping in an abandoned house or other places. But while I was running, I didn't know what I was looking for. I knew that there was something there, but I didn't know where to go and how to find this. So you know, it's described that there are miscreants and there are greatly foolish people who are the lowest of mankind and whose knowledge is stolen by illusion. This is from Bhagavad Gita 7:15. And this is the mentality of people living in the Kali Yuga. But Lord Rishabhdev's bodily features are described in the Shastras. We just read how his limbs, his legs, his shoulders, his face, his smile, his entire bodily features were very beautiful, even though they were disheveled. Now, if we saw a person such as Rishabhdev walking on the streets, and there are many, you don't see them too many here, but in big cities like New York or Chicago, there are hundreds and thousands of these people walking around disheveled, but they are not on that platform of being avadutas. They are under the modes of ignorance, and their captor to that mode of ignorance is normally some form of intoxication. When speaking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we have to also understand that his body is not material. The process of a material object is, it goes through 4 stages: birth, growth, deterioration, and eventually demise, death, changing. But the Lord's body is eternally youthful. Example is Lord Krishna, when he was fighting on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He was a great-grandfather at that time. His children had children. But still, his bodily appearance was that of a youth, between 16 and 25 years old. It's described in the 10th canto, or 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that the demigods and the great sages also they also do not know the origin. Even though Lord Krishna is the source of all of these demigods. We know that Lord Brahma was the first living entity born in this material world. He was born from the lotus flower that emanated from Garbhodakshai Vishnu's body. And we know one day of Brahma consists of thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. and his life expectancy is 100 years. And there are hundreds and millions and trillions of Lord Brahmas in this creation, in other material creations, and in all of those creations where time continually passes and passes and passes. Lord Krishna, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he remains unchanged. God has characteristics. What are the characteristics of the Supreme Lord? He's full of all strength. He's full of all fame. He's full of all knowledge. He's full of all wealth. And he's full of all renunciation. Yes. Beings that we are also part and parcel of Krishna, we have some of these qualities, but in very minute proportions. I know for myself, I have no beauty. My strength is diminishing day by day because of my progressive deterioration of my body. Knowledge, I have knowledge. My knowledge is not coming from anything that is provided for me within the realms of this material world, but my knowledge and your knowledge is coming from the literatures that are provided by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, specifically to help us escape from this material entanglement. Renunciation, I have some renunciation. For now 47 years I've been practicing Krishna consciousness and learning day by day by reading Bhagavad Gita, by reading these literatures, by looking and seeing examples of great personalities like Rishabhdev, how renunciation is very, very important for advancement in spiritual life. But my renunciation is minute in comparison to Lord Krishna's. We know that he married 16,108 queens. All of his wives were the most exotic and beautiful women that anyone could ever imagine. And he acted as a dutiful husband, sometimes seeming to be henpecked. But every morning, lying next to his wives in bed, they would want to cuddle and hug him and squeeze him and keep him by their sides. But he would renounce them. He would get up from his bed. He would go and he would perform his sacrifices. He would perform his duties as a grihastha. Not that he needed to perform these activities, but he did them for whose benefit? He did them for our benefit. He did them to teach us how we should prepare our lives. So we're here making preparations for what? Are you making preparations to have another child? Are you making preparations to go to college or to buy a new car Are you making preparations to accumulate wealth or immigrate to some faraway foreign land? Or are you making preparations to get out of this material world? How many are making preparations to get out of this material world? By a show of hands. Making these types of preparation means one must apply themselves 3%? Is that enough? 10%? 50%? No, one must apply themselves 100% in order to escape. Living in this material world, we have many nemesis. Do you know what a nemesis is? A nemesis is an enemy, an adversary, someone who is after you, always. And who are these nemesis that are disturbing our efforts to make spiritual advancement? They come under the control of Maya. We have Adi-atmic, Adi-bhotik, Adi-daivik. We have Tamagun, Rajagun, Sattvagun. All of these are working against us. Each morning, Maya will call her army together, and they know the weaknesses of each and every one of us, and they will plan how they can keep us entrapped in this material world, how they can control us, and how they can force us to again have to take birth in this material world. We have the senses of this body, the gross and subtle senses. So some of us we can see a little bit chubby. This means we like to eat. So what does that mean? Is that Maya has control of our tongues. She is saying, let me offer this young man or this young woman some tasty morsels. Have them stuff themselves. And then, when it's time to leave this material world, instead of thinking of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they'll be thinking of some delicious food that they had enjoyed their entire life. And just that will cause them to take birth again in the material world. There are others, monists, there are yogis who go to the forest and they practice severe, stringent austerities. They learn the process of renunciation. They give up all of their worldly pleasures. They forego marriage. They live a life of celibacy. Even some of them, disheveled, just as Rishabhdev, wander through the forests. But Maya is a very clever woman. She has one last trick that she will do for this type of person. She will reach into her pocket and she will pull out a piece of paper and she will hand it to that individual. It's a diploma. And it says, "Congratulations, because you have endeavored so hard and performed so many austerities. Now you are God." And this is the dream and the hope of the Mayavadis. But we are not Mayavadis, we are Vaishnavas. So we know that our purpose is to become renounced. It's not to give up using the senses of the body, but it's meant to use the senses in the service of Krishna. Krishna's name is Rishikesh. So Krishna is the master of the senses. In my first book that I received as a devotee was Srimad Bhagavatam. At that time we had only one book, and that was the books that Srila Prabhupada had printed in India, the first volume of Srimad Bhagavatam. As a very, very, very neophyte devotee, reading the descriptions that were described on the process of creation, how, just as I said earlier, from a lotus flower which emanated from Garbhodakshaya Vishnu, all of our world, everything we see, everything we perceive, everything we know that exists is inside the stem of that lotus flower. So if you were a fresh face from the streets and I told you that you're living inside the stem of a flower, you would think that I'm crazy. It would be very difficult for you to accept. But we must accept. We should not let doubt enter into our minds. We have to just accept the Shastras as they are. What is this book? What is the title of this book? Bhagavad Gita. What is this important? As it is. So if there's something in Shastra that we don't agree with, if there's something that is, befuddled our intelligence, we should not discard it. We must accept it as it is. Because this knowledge is not like the knowledge we receive in the mundane material world. This knowledge is descending. And in our sampradaya, where does our knowledge begin? It begins with Krishna himself. Krishna instructs Brahma. And Brahma in turn instructs his sons. So in this way, this knowledge is being handed down. Just as Prabhupada is always described, like a very sweet ripened mango from the top of a tree down one branch at a time, coming down to us. And now this knowledge is in our hands. So Rishabdev, being the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he was perfect and he was complete in himself. He need not have done anything. But the Lord ascends into this material world for two functions. One is to destroy the demons, and the other is to deliver the fallen conditioned souls. Only those who are showing interest in self-realization, in getting out of this material world. It says, Bahunam Janmanamante Jana Gunapapajate Vasudevam Sarvamiti Sabmahatma Sudalam. So that Mahatma is very, 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 very rare. Amongst all of us sitting here, the accumulation of numbers of lifetimes we have been here, we could not count in 1,000,000 years. And the number of lifetimes that we may still remain here, we might not be able to count in 1,000,000 years. But we have that opportunity today to finish up this birth and death process. And all it requires is surrendering to Krishna.